आपने अपनी बुक्स में भी, कॉन्वर्सेशंस में भी धार्मिक वे ऑफ लाइफ को बहुत बार मेंशन किया है. कैन यू डिफाइन क्या होता है धार्मिक वे ऑफ लाइफ?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to define. Similarly, uh, uh, like how do you define dharma? Right, dharma has multiple meanings, but for the sort of narrow confines of say public policy, I define it through the prism of ethics. Ethics, which is an important component of dharma. Another is responsibilities. Much of modern discussion is on rights.
Right.
But I think in the Dharmic approach, the focus is more on responsibilities, which means familial responsibilities, societal responsibilities, environmental responsibilities. And also, the third would be, the role of engaging with the rest of the world. I think that's again an important point. We often are told that somehow Bharat was, exposed to the rest of the world only post 1990, the economic reforms of 1990. So that's, very much away from the truth. Except for the period between post-independence, 1947 till about 1990, much of, if you look at our history, we have constantly engaged with the rest of the world. So engaging with the rest of the world, Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam as a concept, is also part of this, dharmic definition. And this way of life, within these sort of definitions of dharma, it maps on to the role of institutions, for example. How do you create more dharmic institutions? How ethical institutions help? Ethical leadership. How do you engage responsibilities in terms of society, in terms of people, and familial responsibilities and things like that. And also the prism of sustainability. How do you create sustainable growth and welfare based on these ideas? So this is what I would, broadly characterize.
Okay.
And in practical sort of terms, the Mahakumbh is an example of a dharmic way of life, right? It's an important component. One is the temples by themselves, right? There are thousands of temples that we have in all our villages. People go to the temples for religious purposes, spiritual purposes. That drives a lot of their choices. Because when you go to a temple, you would invest in tourism, you would invest in going to other areas in that particular place, you would want to reside there for some time. You would have the demand for all the shops around the temple in that village. So you kind of create an economic ecosystem around the temple because of this way of life. Similarly, for the Mahakumbh, for instance, right? The Mahakumbh is another example. It's not a specific temple per se, but it is a sort of a dharmic event which happens once in X number of years. And in this case, 144 plus years, where it became a grand event where you go and take a snan. So that is again an example of what I define as a dharmic way of life. Again, when corporates make economic choices, so somewhere Mukesh Ambani was talking to Jensen Huang, the founder of NVIDIA, in a conference in Mumbai, where he was mentioning that he starts a lot of his projects during the time of Diwali, because that's a good time according for them to begin projects, and both with the Bombay stock market as well as from his personal standpoint.
Correct.
Right? This is not something you would hear from, say, a Western business leader, right? Because the nature of most businesses in India. First of all, most of the top businesses in India still remain family-driven businesses. Okay, they might be publicly listed, but they're all structured around families and extended families, and they're the ones who are the major stakeholders in all these, whether you like it or not. That's the reality, right? Which means the choices that they make, much like Mr. Ambani, is not just driven by what we call completely rational thought, which means it's just not profit and loss. Profit and loss is a component of their decision making. Besides that, there are a lot of other factors, cultural factors, societal factors, their upbringing, how their families have sort of, evolved and how they make decisions. These factors play a very important role in the business choices that these people make, that corporates make. And I think this is again what I call this dharmic way of life, right? Which is another element of it. So you had the temples, the temple-based structures, one. Two is, you have these event-based sort of cultural events across the year in various localities, various scales. And three, you have the impact at the individual level, at the corporate level, which I mentioned. At the individual level, again, if you look at the UPI transactions, the last year, couple of years, the single highest number of UPI transactions in a particular year is during the month of Diwali and during the week of Diwali. So most of the non-essential expenditures, in economic jargon we call it discretionary expenditures, is driven a lot by our cultural norms and narratives. Whereas in the West, it's done only in some pockets, probably in December during Thanksgiving and Christmas. Whereas in Bharat, it's a year-long affair, except for probably the July Chaturmasya period, where it's generally a bit silent in terms of festivals. But it's a year-long exercise where people, not only partake in cultural activities, but use significant amount of time and energy and resources for being part of this, right? So at the individual level, also it makes a very important impact for people to make choices. Lastly, whether it's buying a laptop today or thousands of years back when Kautilya or Kautilya's Arthashastra was there, eventually individuals have to make business decisions to buy, purchase. So in this context, I think from an Indian Bharatiya sense, the matrix is much more diverse and multidimensional than purely on profit and loss. And I think all of this sort of, are some examples of what this Dharmic life is, and in terms of an economic public policy standpoint.